In this video, I'm going to give it to you straight. That means every tutorial in this mashup of tutorials only has straight cuts and straight sewing. Perfect for beginners, perfect when you want to teach someone to sew, or perfect for fundraisers or projects that you just want to make a lot of quickly. You don't want to deal with curves, you don't want to deal with angles, nothing complicated. Straight lines, straight sewing, let's get going.
Ready for a quick project that'll get that fabric stash down? We're going to make coasters today. I am going to show you how quickly these little coasters sew up from 5 squares of fabric and a little bit of fleece. Let's get started. Making these coasters is so easy, and the first step is to iron a few things. So these are going to be the 4 prints. We're going to use the burgundy one twice that will be on the front. So here's an idea of 1, 2, 3, 4. This one used the cream twice, and then 1 fabric on the back. So the brown is going to be the back. So we're going to fuse the fleece onto there. It's 1/4 inch shorter on each side. You want to make sure the gritty part, which is the fusible material, is on the wrong side of your back fabric. And then you're just going to follow the manufacturer's instructions. I'm using a Pellon fusible fleece. So no steam, just press down for about 10 seconds. So we have that attached. We're going to set that aside. Now we're going to take each of these prints that will be on the front, that'll be kind of woven together, and I'm just spraying it, misting it with water instead of using a steam setting on my iron. Now we have our 4 pieces. We're going to turn the back right side up and put it down on your workspace. And then I'm going to use this again just to show you. Now, if you're using 2 prints, because I'm using 3 prints from one of my collections, this is a September leaf toss from my monthly placemat panels from Riley Lake Design. So I'm using 2 of them twice instead of using 4 different prints, because that's what I want to do. So if you're using 2 that are the same, you want to use them alternately. So the first one you put down and the third one, or the second and the fourth one. So when you're placing these on top of the backing, you want to make sure your raw edges are on the outside. The folded edge is going towards the center. So you're just going to line them up around the square. And so you'll notice I have the same print matching. So it's going to be this corner and this corner. Now, when you go to put your 4th one, you're going to take the first one and you're going to fold it down. And then you're going to place the 4th one, and then fold this back up. And that is how you get it to weave together so that you're seeing 1 quadrant for each of the 4. Now I'm going to grab some fabric clips, and I'm just going to clip this whole thing together. And I like to clip right at where they all come together on these 4 sides. And then if you want to, you could clip kind of where you turn, but I find that this works really well. Now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. We're going to sew all the way around, and there is no need to leave an opening for turning because we're going to turn through these folds. So, fun fact, I thought I videotaped the sewing and the clipping and explaining of all this, but I took 1 photograph. Anyway, you can see that I sewed all the way around the coaster with a 1/4 inch seam, and then I clipped the corners. Now, what I wanted to tell you and thought I told you, was instead of clipping just straight at the corner, clip twice so that you're removing a bit more of that fabric, because these corners are going to have a bit in them anyway between the folded over fabric, 2 layers, the backing, and a little bit of the fleece. So you want to clip that really well. Now to turn it right side out, you simply put your fingers, get this open to the fold to grab at the back. Using your fingers, you're going to turn this right side out and get those corners pushed out as much as possible. And then if you need to, just grab like a turning tool, and then you can kind of push those corners out even better. Just do it slowly and gently, because you don't want to push so hard that you push through the fabric and ruin your corner. Now, another thing, if you're going to use a turning tool, is make sure you also put that through all of the layers so that you're going against that fleece and not kind of in between 2 layers, because you're not going to get all the pieces of that corner. And that's it. Now I'm just going to press it so that it's nice and smooth. Some people will stitch all the way around again, but I just like the look of it where it looks like it's just fabric woven together.
What does a burrito have to do with a pillowcase? Well, I'm going to show you how to make pillowcases using a burrito method. No, you cannot eat it. It's called a burrito method because you roll fabric up into the cuff in order to sew it. Now, I've done a few pillowcase tutorials before, but this is going to be the best for the absolute beginner. I have boiled it down to only what is necessary. So this is a standard size. This is a king size, which is huge. And if you make this size, you are gonna think you are doing it wrong because there's so much fabric involved. But I promise if you use my measurements, you will be doing it correctly. In this video tutorial, I'm going to be doing another travel size pillowcase because the technique is exactly the same, but you're going to be able to see this. Because again, so much fabric in standard, queen, and king size pillowcases, it is hard to get it all on camera in my filming space. Now, if you also love written directions, I have a pattern in my Etsy shop. It has lots and lots of pictures with the written description. So instead of having to come back to this video and hit pause and hit pause and hit pause, you're going to have something that you can print out or have on your computer or your iPad right next to you as you sew. And then you can refer to this video if you want a talking or a visual reminder of what I'm doing. One thing that I love about sewing pillowcases is you can make whatever you want, and it is a great first sewing project. This is what my niece made the very first time she ever sewed. I think we got it done about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. She was sewing very slowly. I just let her go whatever speed she was comfortable with. And she went home with something that she was proud of and that she could use. Who is ready to make pillowcases? We're going to start with the supplies. So you need a pillow. I am going to be using this 12 by 16 that I found at Hobby Lobby. If you were to buy the pattern in my Etsy shop, it does show you 5 different sizes, 2 different travel pillows, because I found this. I'm assuming some other craft stores carry maybe a 12 by 16. But then when I went on Amazon, 13 by 18, they called it a toddler pillow, was the easiest to find. So I included the sizes that you need for both of those. So you need the pillow. You need your fabric for the body of the pillow, your fabric for the cuff. I'm going to show you how to use painter's tape to set a seam guide when we're doing the French seam. I'm going to be using thread that matches the cuff, rotary cutter, cutting mat, rulers. I'm also going to show you, if you're new, how to make it easy to know when to turn when you're sewing on a right angle. So we're going to use a heat erasable pen, or you could use a pencil and a ruler. And then pins or clips. Now, you do want to use non-directional fabric. And I'm going to put a link to another video where I really walk through directional versus non-directional. But for absolute beginners, I highly recommend non-directional fabric. And for that, this is absolutely perfect, and it is so cute. Basically, there's no top or bottom, left or right. And if I turn the fabric all the way around, it looks good from every angle. That is the best way to test and know that you have non-directional fabric. So highly recommend that. That is going to be the easiest. You're not going to have to think about fabric direction. You're just going to think about making this cute pillowcase. Something to know about pillows. This says premium pillow insert 12 by 16. And boy, oh boy, is it a fatty. But the 12 by 16 doesn't mean it's going to be 12 by 16 when it's puffed up like this. It means that fabric is 16 by 12. So if we make our pillowcase a little bit wider, and I like to make them 2 inches longer so that the cuff goes a little bit over, it is going to fit. That's also how you can have pillowcases that will fit all different thicknesses of a standard pillowcase, which is what most people are going to end up making, but I do love having the different sizes, and this is going to be nice and easy to show you. Now, because pillowcases are constantly washed, I recommend that you pre-wash your fabric because it is going to shrink a little bit, and sometimes different fabrics, different blends, different brands will shrink a little bit differently. And if you sew everything together and it looks beautiful and then you wash it and the cuff shrinks a little different than the body, it's going to get a little puckered and not be the beautiful pillowcase you planned. For that reason, I always recommend yardage that's a little bit higher than the measurements because you need to allow for a little bit of shrinkage when you pre-wash it. Let's look at this one that I already did. This is the body. I'm going to use the same fabric, but today we're going to do a gold cuff. And then this is the cuff. Most patterns, the standard is to show measurements that are width times height, but pillows show measurements as height times width. So I'm always going to be talking height times width, so you don't have to be thinking back and forth. Normally, I have pre-cut fabric when I start these tutorials, but I have been asked a couple times by beginners to show how I do the cutting. So I'm going to do that because this is, as I said, pillowcases for absolute beginners. So I'm going to look at my fabric and I'm going to figure out which direction I need to turn it so that I can get 26 by 17. So this is 27 wide, 25 until it gets to the selvage. So we need to do the 26 in this direction. Now, because it's a little bit longer than my mat, I'm going to fold it in half and I'm going to make sure these edges are as lined up as they can be. And then I'm going to put the fold on a line. And I have the fold towards me so that it's going to be easy for me to see that it is lined up straight. And then I put this a little bit over this 1 inch line over here because we did see that it wasn't totally straight. So we're going to start by squaring that off. So I'm going to put my ruler on there. I'm going to line it up on that line. I'm going to hold that down and I'm going to trim. So now this line is perpendicular to this fold. So now we're ready to measure and cut our 26 inches in this direction. And now we need 17 inches. So we know that these sides are parallel. So I'm lining them up on my mat and then I'm checking up here. Not quite straight, kind of like we had to do with the other one. So I'm going to push that up so the whole thing is beyond that line. And then I'm going to trim that straight. Now my ruler is 24.5 inches. So I am going to have to move it to get the whole thing cut. But I can't line this totally up with the end because again, it's too short. But I can make sure all of these lines on my ruler are lined up with the lines on the mat. So I'll just cut as far as I can go and then I will move the ruler so that I can finish that. Now we have 3 sides that are squared off. And now I'm going to line that up with the top line, making sure these lines are still lined up nicely. I'm going to double check my cutting directions. I'm always double, triple checking. And then we are going to cut 17 inches from this end. Now it's a little bit harder to do that and know that you're straight because you can't really use a line over here. So one trick that I do, if you have more than one ruler, you're just going to butt it up one to the other. And I have that straight. So now I know that this is lined up because I have it, the green one lined up down here and the pink one lined up down here. I always hold my hand flat on my rulers, put my pinky here. It kind of holds the ruler in place. A lot of people hold their rulers like this. And I know some people that always do that and they've never had a problem, but I ended up really hurting the tendon in my thumb and I had to wear a brace for like 6 months and it hurt really, really bad. So if you want to learn from my mistake, always keep your hand flat. And then when you're using your rotary cutter, make sure you're starting out straight. Kind of set it at the end and before you start moving, make sure you're not tilted. Because if you're tilted, you're more likely to push the ruler and not cut straight. So make sure it is straight up and down. There we go. See, this is why I'm doing the travel size because that's still pretty big to cut. But those are my squaring and cutting tips for fabric. Now we have that cut to size and I already cut the cuff. This is 7 inches wide. For a standard pillowcase, your body needs to be 40 inches by 27 inches. And your cuff is going to be 9 inches by 40 inches. Now we are going to head to the ironing board and we are going to fold and press this in half. Now, if it was a patterned print, you would be putting the wrong sides together so that the right side of the fabric would be showing. For example, if we were using this for the cuff, we wouldn't fold it and press it like that. With the right sides together, we would fold it and press it like this with the wrong sides together. So you're seeing the fabric that will become the cuff. Now you're going to open your cuff with the fold up. So this is the right side of the fabric. If you're using a print, this would be the wrong side. But basically you want it to kind of be popping up like a tent and not looking like an open book. Then we are going to take our body fabric and we're going to put it right sides together with the cuff. And we're going to line up the raw edges. Line up the edges that are close to you and not away from you so that you can see them well. Then you can use pins or fabric clips and we're going to secure this together. Okay, so now we have that lined up with that. Now comes the burrito technique. We're going to fold the main fabric about an inch from here because we're going to sew here, but we do not want to catch this side of the fabric. Then we're going to roll it again and roll it again. So this is like the stuffing to the burrito, and this is the wrap. The reason I folded it like that was because now we are going to fold this over and we're going to match this raw edge with these two raw edges. So we need to make sure that's going to be easy to do with this fabric inside without this fabric getting in the way of our sewing and our seam allowance. So I'm just going to pull that over. I'm going to take this clip off and I'm going to clip these 3 layers together now. When you're at the end, make sure that this edge and this edge are lined up so that you get it started correctly. And then you're just going to move along and move each pin or clip, take it out so that you're getting the 3 layers. So the 2 raw edges of the cuff and 1 raw edge of the body. Now, because we use non-directional fabric for the body, we just put it on there either direction. We didn't have to think about which raw edge should be here, etc., etc. And that is why this is the perfect beginner pillowcase. And now it looks like a burrito. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew straight down here with a 1/4 inch seam. If you've done much sewing, you know that sometimes you get an awful knot. We call them bird's nests in the bottom. Because as you get started, sometimes the bobbin thread gets knotted or it pulls down this top thread. So because we're starting off the edge, I'm going to just grab a scrap piece of fabric and we're going to call it a leader fabric. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to start sewing on the leader fabric. So if there's any kind of knot, it's going to be on here and not on your project. So you just start sewing. And then once you get onto your project, you're going to go backwards a few stitches to secure that thread. And I am using a 1/4 inch foot. So if I run the edge of my foot next to the edge of the fabric, it is a 1/4 inch. And now I'm just going to sew straight down. Now, I never pull things off as I am sewing because especially when you're new, you're more likely to twist things because you're trying to move and pull and unpin or unclip at the same time. So I always stop about an inch from my pin or my clip, take it off, and then keep going. When you get to the end, just go backwards a few stitches to knot. And then you're just going to cut that leader fabric off and we're going to use it the next time we sew. Okay, Tara, that doesn't look like a pillowcase, you might be thinking, but never fear, it is time to pull the body fabric out of the cuff. And that is going to be flipping the cuff right side out. And the beautiful part of that is it is going to encapsulate all these raw seams inside the cuff. So what you're going to do is you're just going to open one end and you're going to grab the fabric and pull it out. Now I always start by flipping that down. You know, like I fold my cuffs, fold that down a little bit because then you're not going to put strain and stress on the end of that as you just pull this fabric out. So you're pulling the fabric out and the cuff is going down. And voila, we have our cuff and our body and all of our seams are in here. Now we go back to the ironing board and we're going to press this forward. Once we get that pressed, you have a decision to make. Whether you want to sew close to this edge so that it kind of holds these seams and everything together like that, or if you just want to leave it as is. And I'll show you both ways. So on this standard pillowcase, I did sew really close and I used the same color thread. I highly recommend that if you're new to sewing, because then if it isn't super straight, you're not really going to notice because that thread really matches the fabric. You could use an accent color if you wanted to, but any jiggles would be more noticeable. Now on this travel pillow, I didn't. I just left it plain, just kept it really basic. It's going to be totally fine either way. For this one, we will do the stitching so we can compare the 2 travel sizes. This is the bigger 13 by 18. So I'm going to start on this leader fabric again and then just sew next to this seam line. And I'm just eyeballing where the seam is compared to my foot. Now this is the part of the process where I think, this pillow is so small, why do I need all this fabric? But trust me, if you follow my measurements, it's going to work. If you turn it, this is the cuff and this is the body. So now it looks a little more reasonable, but it still looks too tall. Next, we're going to be doing our French seam, and this is really important. And this is where Most people mess up at least once or twice. I might have when making my samples. Let's talk about a French seam. Now, I know I told you this is for the absolute beginner, and some of you are probably thinking French seam does not sound very absolute beginner, Tara, but I promise you, you can do it, and it is a great beginner skill. If you have a serger, you don't need to make a French seam. You could just serge when we get to this step. But I want to tell you what a French seam is first. So French seams completely enclose your raw edges so that when you're washing and using the pillowcase, nothing is going to be pulling out and fraying. It's called a French seam because they were popularized in France during the 18th and 19th century, especially in fine clothing. You want to fold so that the right side of the fabric is out. That is going to be our first stitching. We're going to stitch down here and here, basically our raw edges. That's a nice folded cuff, and this is a fold in the fabric. Now you'll notice these are not lining up well, even though I have the seam line lined up well and I have everything lined up well over here. So my cuff was just a little bit too big, so I'm just going to trim that. Before you trim anything, you always want to double, triple check that everything else is lined up well. And it is, so I'm going to just trim that so it is even. Okay, so now that that is done, the right side is up, the wrong sides are together, everything's lined up. We are going to clip or pin down this side and this side. And then we are going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. I'll use pins this time. I'm going to show you the trick about putting a little line for where you need to turn. This is super, super helpful if you're teaching people to sew, or if you're new and you really can't figure out where to turn, because you're coming down here with a 1/4 inch and then you need to know where to stop, lift your foot, and pivot to be a 1/4 inch from this side. As you gain experience, you're going to know what to look for on your foot. But when you're starting, I highly recommend you just take a ruler and you mark it. So I'm going to put this ruler a 1/4 inch from this edge. This is a heat erasable pen. You can use a pencil too. And I'm just drawing a little line at a 1/4 inch. So now I can just sew down here, and when I hit that line, I know that it's time to turn. It's just a much bigger visual for you. So that's a nice trick for beginners. Now that I'm at my sewing machine, I wish I had put the pins on the opposite side, because I always like to start on the body side of the fabric when I'm sewing, instead of the cuff side, because this is going to show on your done pillowcase. So you don't want threads hanging off. And I want to keep this simple, so I want to keep using the leader fabric. So start down here. It's not a big deal. I can still get the pins out. They're just coming from the bottom. So we're going to start on our leader fabric. Then I'm going to lift my foot because this is pushing kind of weird. I'm going to put that under there. I'm going to use my scissors. Never put your fingers too close. Use your scissors to guide things if you need to. Put my foot down, make sure that is lined up because this is a 1/4 inch foot. I'm going to pull that first pin out and we're going to sew. I put my mark on the wrong side of the fabric, so I'm just going to grab my pen and my ruler and mark again. Easy peasy. Now with a 1/4 inch foot, if you have one, mine has little lines here, and that shows me when that gets to the edge of the fabric, that's when it's time to turn. Some feet have that, some don't. So I want to show you how to do this marking. Now I'm going to leave the needle down, lift the foot, and we're going to turn 90 degrees, and we're going to sew the other side. Next, we need to trim the corners so that we don't have so much fabric that needs to get folded in there that it won't be a good corner. Sometimes people will go straight across. I like to do 2 cuts and come down from one side and then go like that, making sure you do not clip your stitching. You get close, but don't clip it. And then we are also going to just do that angled cut towards the fold where we started. What we're going to do next is we're going to turn this inside out and we're going to sew again. That is going to encapsulate these raw edges. But you can see there are some long threads. And so if we were to just do that and sew, some of these threads are definitely going to be sticking out of our pillowcase and we'd have to trim them later. So a little bit of an easier way to do that is if you have long threads like that, just take a ruler, put it right on the edge of the fabric and just trim them with your rotary cutter before you turn things inside out. So now we're going to turn this inside out. We're going to make sure we push those points out. And now I'm going to take it back to the ironing board and I'm going to iron it so that it is nice and flat. We need to make sure that this seam right here right here, is right on the edge. We don't want a little bit of fabric inside and it kind of pinched and inside there. We need it pulled all the way out. And the way that I do that is I just get it as close as I can, and then I just kind of rub my fingers like that to get it pushed out where I want it before I hit it with the iron and the heat. Now I'm going to show you my painter's tape trick. When we were sewing and I was using my 1/4 inch foot and I was sewing a 1/4 inch, it was really easy because I just lined my fabric up with that 1/4 inch, and I'm used to sewing 1/4 inch seams a lot. But with a French seam, we now need to sew 3/8 of an inch from that edge, which I'm not used to. Of course, it is marked on your needle plate. I can see there's a 3/8 right there. This little line is 3/8. The edge here is 3/8, but that is kind of hard to watch. And so you can do it, obviously, but I like using this painter's tape trick. What I'm going to do is I just grabbed a little piece and I'm going to line the tape up on the guidelines on my sewing machine. So much easier to use a bright blue piece of tape as a guide than having to look at little lines in metal and on my bobbin cover. Now, painter's tape is great because it is a low tack tape. It's not going to leave sticky residue on your sewing machine. You don't want any stickiness staying on your project. When I get close to the edge, I'm going to lift my foot and I'm going to get my pillowcase lined up. And I'm starting with the folded edge. So we'll be sewing across the bottom and then up the side towards the cuff, just like we did when we did the first round. Now, I forgot to mark where to turn, but I can do it right now. Lift my foot and turn, and we're going to do the long side. Now, when you get to this part where you're going over the cuff, this is quite thick because you have a seam, you have like 8 layers right there. So it's a bit of a bump. Sometimes your stitch line will jig a little bit. Don't worry about it. You're never going to notice on a pillowcase. But if you want to, you can kind of help press that down with the tip of your scissors and just go slowly. Now we have our French seam sewn. No raw edges showing anywhere. You do not cut corners when you've done a French seam, or you're basically creating raw edges, which is not the point. So all we need to do is turn it right side out. Let's see how we did. The first thing I do when I turn things right side out is I just check along those French seam edges for any threads. We cut most of them off, so this is looking pretty good. I just kind of pull it out like that. And there's one, it just pulls right out. Sometimes they don't pull right out, and you don't want to pull too hard. So you would just take scissors and clip it right close. All right, so we only had 2. That's amazing. So cutting those threads off before you do that second stitching makes a huge difference. Now, if you want to, you can take it back to the ironing board and you can press that out so that it is going to be a little bit smoother. Totally up to you. If you feel like this is wrinkled, I would give that a quick press. Now, because I'm keeping this pillow and I'm not selling it, I'm cutting that tag off because they bother me. If you're doing sew to sell and you're selling things with pillow forms in them, you do need to keep these tags on. Cute little travel pillow. And you can see using the same fabric and a different color cuff gives a bit of a different look. Now, I want to know, let me know in the comments, do you know how old kids are when they get to start using pillows? Because I am so ready to be making pillowcases for my great nephew who I've been making hooded towels for. So there are our pillowcases, and you can get the pattern that has all the directions, lots of photographs, so you can print it out or have it on your computer or iPad next to your sewing machine and get this done. You can always refer back to this video. And again, it shows 5 different sizes. On my YouTube channel and in my Etsy shop, I have a playlist or a pattern category called Beginner Sewing Patterns. And every one of the patterns in those sections has 2 things in common. It is only straight cutting and straight sewing. So they are fantastic as you are learning to sew, if it is the first thing you're ever trying to sew. So I wanted to put them a little bit separate from all of the other things that I have so that if you're new, you know that you can go there with confidence and it's going to be something that you're going to be able to do so that you can fall in love with the process of sewing just like I have. Happy sewing and sweet dreams.
Who's ready for the holidays, for hostess gifts? Who is ready for a glass of wine? I got my hair up. I am ready to work. Let's make some wine bags. In today's episode, I'm going to show you a simple way to make reversible wine bags so you can have either side out. No circles. We're going to do box bottoms. We're going to tie it with a bow, and it's going to fit either one of these size wine bottles. I love that they're reversible. You can pick two different fabrics. You want to make sure the fabrics coordinate because you will see that inside fabric a little bit when you have it wrapped around your wine bottle. These wine bottle bags are going to have a box bottom, so no circle cutting. It's going to be nice and simple. So let's get started. You're going to need 2 pieces of fabric, 12 inches wide, 16 inches high. If you're using a directional fabric, make sure you're paying attention and that you have the direction going on the 16 inch. And then when you go to sew it together, make sure you're paying attention to which side has the top of your pattern. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to fold this in half, and then you're going to clip or pin, and we're going to sew down one long side and across the bottom. Again, making sure you're paying attention if your fabric is directional, that you leave the top open because nobody wants a wine bag where everything on the fabric is upside down. Now you're just going to press the seams open on the long end of both pieces of fabric. You don't need to go all the way down because we will be trimming off that point. And while you're at your ironing board, take it and fold down the top edge 1/2 inch. And this doesn't have to be super exact. You just want to make sure both halves are pretty consistent. And you're going to press that as well. This way we can get all of our ironing done at once. Now we're going to make our box bottoms. And I love using this 1.5 inch wide Cute Cuts ruler because that is exactly how far from the tip that we are going to mark our sewing line. But first we need to get it all lined up. Now I've made quite a few of these wine bags and I have created a system that makes it go quickly and evenly. So what you're going to do is you're going to line up this seam line on one of your grid lines of your cutting mat. So you have the seam line up here and then you have the point where it seamed right there. So we have both of those on that 10-inch mark. Doesn't matter which mark, just put it on a mark. Then you're going to flatten the bottom. So see how it creates that square. And you're going to make sure that that stitch line is lining up here, the stitch line here, to that seam line there. And then also making sure that, that everything just stays straight on that line. Sometimes you need to adjust it because sometimes you'll put it down and it'll be like a little bit wider here and there. And so I have found this is the quickest and easiest way to get this done. And I am all about getting projects done quickly whenever possible. So now we're going to take our 1.5 inch ruler or just whatever ruler you have, and you're going to measure 1.5 inches from the tip to where we're going to sew. And then I'm just going to mark this. I'm just using a regular pen because this is going to be totally inside, encapsulated, so you'll never see that pen mark again. Then I'm going to put a little pin in that. Cute little Riley Blake pin, I love it. Now I'm going to grab this without moving it. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to put that down because we already have that all lined up nicely. And we're going to mark from the other side. Now you're just going to repeat with the other half of your wine bag. Now we're just going to sew along all 4 of those lines. And this is definitely an area where you can daisy chain them, meaning you don't have to take them totally off, just sew one to the other. And if you're doing a lot of wine bags, this really does save you some time and thread. So are wine bags something you'd like to see more of? Would you like to see how to do them with a drawstring inside? A little bit more complicated? Leave me a note in the comments and let me know if that's something that's of interest. Now the next thing you're going to do is you're going to trim 1/4 inch from that line. You can use your rotary cutter, but I'm just going to do this with scissors so I don't have to keep moving my cameras all over my room. Now the next step is to get these wrong sides together. So you're going to take one and turn it right side out. It does not matter at all which one because these wine bags will be reversible. So you don't have to make any decisions yet about which side you want out. Then we're going to put one bag inside the other and we're going to match these seams. You don't really have to worry too much down here. The main thing is to get these seams matched at the top. So the seam line and the fold, and then I'm just going to put a little clip there. And then we're just lining up this top edge. Because this is reversible and because whoever wants a snarl of a knot in their thread, I'm going to be pulling up my bobbin thread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my foot down, put my needle down, holding this thread, the top thread, and then I'm going to pick the needle up and I'm going to give it a little tug and I'm going to grab that bobbin thread. So now I'm holding on to both the top and the bobbin, and I'm going to put it under that foot and I'm going to hold on to that and I'm going to do a little knot. Now we're going to stitch all the way around, and I usually hold on to that thread until I've taken maybe 2 stitches just to make sure it doesn't get sucked back down under by some gremlin in the sewing machine. And now I'm just going to top stitch all the way around. And now that your wine bag is done, you just have to decide which side you want to be on the outside. So let's just flip this. Put the red on the outside. I think that's just going to be beautiful for fall, for a fall hostess gift, for Thanksgiving. Put that wine in there, and then I just cut a piece of 1-inch ribbon. You can use anything. I'm just going to tie it right there. And now it is ready to go.
I'm ready to stop reading, but I need a bookmark. Should I grab a receipt, part of the box from Gum, or should I grab this super cute fabric corner bookmark? Obviously, I'm going to go for this. You know, studies show that people with cute bookmarks read more, retain more, and enjoy their books even more than those who use receipts or trash, basically. Okay, maybe studies don't say that, but I say that. I mean, look at how cute that looks. So I'm going to show you 3 different sizes that you can make, and you can decide which one you like the best. These make a great addition to a gift of a book. It's a super quick and easy thing to sew and sell, and it is just fun to have for yourself. So I'm going to show you 3 different sizes, 3.5-inch square, 3-inch square, and a 2.5-inch square. They are each cut from a square of fabric that is a 1/2 inch larger, so 4-inch, 3.5-inch, and 3-inch. It requires 3 pieces of fabric. 1 piece for the back, 1 piece for this full square where the book's pages are going to go over top, and then 1 that we're going to be folding into a triangle for that top corner. Then you're also going to use a piece of interfacing. I am using this interfacing, fusible interfacing from Heat and Bond, and it's kind of like a paper feel to it. It's just going to give the bookmark a little bit more shape and stability. And this gets cut a 1/2 inch smaller than whichever size square you are starting with. You're going to be turning over the back one, and you will fuse this right into the center. That way you're not going to have this extra paper inside your seam allowance. Your seam allowance will pretty much just go right around that. So those are the pieces that you need. Now these flowers do have a direction. The top is all up here, but they're not super directional and they're not large icons like some of these are. So you can just cut that however you want. And if you fold it into a triangle and make sure you put it on here where the flowers are facing up, it's going to be beautiful. You just don't want to do it where the flowers look like they're falling down into your book. However, if you like using fabrics with more icons and you want to be more specific, I'm going to teach you how to fussy cut into any of these sizes, or how to fussy cut so that you have exactly what you want on the back of your bookmark. So let's get started. Now these sizes sound well and good, but what do they look like in a book? Let me show you. Back to our Secret Lives of Colors. This is the larger one, which is 3.5 by 3.5, which is pretty big, in my opinion. Then this one is the 3 by 3. And then this one is the 2.5 by 2.5. So you can see they're all going to hold the pages. They're just going to hold a little bit differently. And then if we take them out, I just want to show you, it doesn't really add a lot of bulk. You put a few pages around it, and it's not going to harm your book. Now, this is kind of a medium-sized hardback book, but what if you are just, reading an airport book? So let's grab John Grisham and see what they look like in here. So this is just a more traditional size novel, and that's getting a bit big, in my opinion. The medium one, I'm like Goldilocks in the bookmark. That's that size. And the smaller one. So I think this is my favorite. It works well, and the fact that I have the ruler that is the perfect size to make it makes everything that much easier for me. So I think this is my go-to size, but you can decide which size you like the best. Let me know in the comments what you think you would lean into. Would you be doing the 3.5 inch finished, the 3 inch, or the 2.5 inch finished? Let me know. So we are going to make another corner bookmark just like this. This is the 3 inch size, and we're going to put this little covered bridge here, and we're going to fussy cut so it is centered on the back. So I have a piece of fabric, and fussy cut basically means just to be very deliberate about what part of the fabric you're using. So if you happen to be lucky and you have a ruler, so this square ruler is the exact size that I need, it's 3.5 inch square, and it has this line here so that I can see what is going to be in that top triangle when I fold it in half to make that shape. Now, if I was making a lot of them at once, I would take a piece of painter's tape, or this is washi tape, which is just a very low tack tape, and I would put it on my ruler just past that line. I want to be able to see the line because then my eye very easily looks in this top corner. It's not going to mess around down here. So just visually makes it a little faster. Then I can just move my ruler around and decide where I want it. So do I want more of this tree, but then I cut off a bit of the bridge? Do I want it here? Anything under the blue won't show because that is going to be in your seam allowance. Anything inside the blue and to this side of this tape, so in this triangle, is going to show on your corner bookmark. So we could do that. We could do this brown one. We could do this white one. So you can just pick different scenes. We could do trees. The main thing is you have to make sure that the ruler is totally on the fabric. So if we tried to do it down here, it wouldn't work because our fabric ends here, but we need the fabric to go all the way to here. So that's one way if you have the perfect size ruler. If you don't, you can use a bigger ruler and tape off the whole square, but I want to show you what I have created. I'm pretty excited about it. I do talk about fussy cutting a bit because I design a bit of fabric where I like to fussy cut. So I have a tutorial for making these 3 size bookmarks in my Etsy shop. So it's got lots of photos. We'll walk you through all of these steps. And it's also going to have these templates. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut these out. The gray is the 1/4 inch seam. So it's basically what this blue does on the ruler. And then you're going to cut out the dark part so that we have like a little window that we can use to figure out what's what. So I just take these sharp scissors. I love these Fiskars, easy action. They're really easy on your thumb. That nice point makes it easy to get into the corner and just trim out the dark section. I also added the size, like the size fabric, and then the size bookmark that you will make on each of these templates so that you don't have to scratch your head if you use them and then you come back another time and want to make more. Just make sure you're not using fabric scissors for this, obviously. Paper scissors, everyone, paper scissors. So that's how you make your template. So this one is the same size as the ruler. We can use this to do the same thing, right? So you're not going to see what's down here, but it's really easy. You don't have to tape or anything. You're just kind of moving the window and seeing exactly what's what and what's going to be where. So let's get a cutting mat. And I'm going to use this rotating one because then we can leave the fabric alone and move the mat and not have to move this quite as much. So this is what we're looking for. We want to have this bridge and a bit of the road in there. Then I'm going to take this, I'm just going to butt it up against there and cut. Now, if I was using the ruler, I could just cut around it, but then you end up with some weird lines sometimes. So what you could also do is take 2 rulers, take one that is basically as long or longer than your fabric, butt it up next to it, move that one, and then cut. That makes sure that your scrap that is left has a nice straight cut on it. And then it also has one edge lined up so we can do the rest just moving around. Now, depending on how much you use rotary cutters, you might want to just turn and be going straight on every cut because sometimes if you do it this way, you might angle a little bit. It takes a little bit of practice. I've even seen people that can do 1, 2, 3. I cannot go this way and I can't really go this way very easily. It's faster for me to turn it. So Rotary cutting around something is a skill that takes practice like most things. So now we have this ready and we have our perfect corner. So now let's get this part. And I'm going to fussy cut this too. You don't have to. This is where your book pages are going to go. But if you have it on the table while you're reading, it looks cute to have the cute little covered bridge there opposite that one. And then we're just going to do the same thing. We're just going to move it around, but this time we're looking at the bottom left triangle instead of the upper right. So you can do it with the ruler or you can use the piece of paper. So just turn it and then you can just see what is going to be where. So now we have the corner and the bottom. And now we need to fussy cut the back. And this is just going to be the full square. So if we were using this, you can't really see through part of it. I guess you could print it again and cut that corner out. So then you have the full square if you think you're going to be doing a lot of fussy cutting like this. But I usually just do this and then I like peek and make sure that all looks good. Now, if you were sewing and selling these, this obviously takes a bit longer than if you used a fabric more like the flowers, where you can just cut, and cut without having to pay attention to what is going on. You might sell it a little faster if somebody really likes what you've put up here. I'm not sure how much more money you would get for it versus something that is random. I'm not sure how much more value someone's going to see with this than with this, but I don't know, you could give it a try. And then I have a 3-inch square of the interfacing. So we have our back, our inside, our triangle, and our interfacing. And now let's go to the ironing board. So here are our 3 pieces. This is the back. So I'm going to turn that over. I'm going to put my interfacing, making sure the shiny side is down because we want it to adhere to the fabric and not to our iron. Going to follow manufacturer's instructions and just adhere that. Now we're going to take this one and we are going to just fold it corner to corner to make a triangle and press. This is going to be our front. This is our back. I'm going to grab 3 clips, and the way I clip is very important too, because it helps me when I'm sewing, especially if I'm making a lot of these. You don't want to have to be checking and making sure you like where you're starting and stopping. So I have a system for how I do this. Ask my husband, I have systems for almost everything. So I'm going to put the front base fabric down. Then I'm going to put the triangle. I always like my triangle in the upper right. Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to flip it so they are right sides together. Because these are directional, I want to make sure they're the same direction. I don't want this to be sideways or upside down. If you're using non-directional, doesn't matter at all. So I have all these edges lined up, and now I'm going to do 3 clips. The top of the triangle and the 2 sides. So I like to leave my opening at the bottom of my bookmark. I would either do it here or here. You definitely want it to be on this individual place and not on the triangle. So by putting my clips there, I know that I'm going to start here, go all the way around and stop here, leaving as much of this as possible open for turning. The smaller ones, the harder it is to turn. So now we just need to go to the sewing machine. I'm going to just use gray thread. I could use white with this one, but I made a bunch earlier and I found just using gray kind of neutral, I didn't have to change my thread as much. So we're going to sew around. And you'll notice I'm pretty much at the edge of that interfacing when I need to turn. And if I'm slow enough to stop a little bit short, I'll lift my foot, turn it 45 degrees and take 1 stitch, and then lift and turn. That is a way to make it so that your corners are going to be a little bit sharper. So it's a good habit to get into. You really do need to leave quite a bit of space on these 2 smaller sizes so that you can turn it right side out. Now, before we do the turning and the pressing, we need to clip these corners. And I like to clip from both sides. Make sure you don't clip where you have the opening because you're going to need that fabric to fold under so that we can get this closed nice and secure. Now I'm going to turn this right side out. Now I want to show you one thing that sometimes makes me panic when I'm turning things right side out. You remember this is going to be on the front. But sometimes when you turn it right side out, your triangle ends up at, in front of the back. So if it's on the upper left and it's not fussy cut like you wanted, don't panic. Just flip it. It's just flipped in the wrong direction. Then I'm going to take a turning tool and I'm going to gently push at these corners. If you push too hard, you're going to end up with threads coming through because you're going to push through that fabric a little bit. So sometimes I like to squeeze it along the seams too. Helps get a little bit of a better corner. Then our opening, we just need to get those threads inside. And I'm going to line that up with my fingers first. And then we're going to press. I want it nice and flat, so I press it pretty well. And then I'm going to use my tailor's clapper. The quilter's clapper is their shorter one. Riley Blake calls the longer one the tailor's clapper. It's basically the same type of piece of wood, just a different length. But what it does is it helps to really flatten those seams, and it also takes some of the heat out so that it's not as hot to the touch. So now it is pressed, and all we need to do is sew all the way around the edge, and it's done. So if you want to sew and sell, or you like giving books like to grandchildren or friends, your book club, this is a great and easy little gift to whip up. Now that we have this pressed and we have it sewn and flipped, this is getting a little bit thick. So I'm going to use these little folded pieces of fabric. It was basically, I think, a 4 or 5 inch square. I folded it in half, zigzagged the edge to make these little pockets. I use it to hang quilts up. But I also use it to help even things up. If I didn't use it, we'd have that much space between this and my needle plate. But if I bump that up against it, it's now even. So it gives your presser foot and your feed dogs something to work with to get going. So it's a little bit easier on your machine, and it's going to make it so it doesn't kind of stall out on you. So now I'm just going to sew close to the edge all the way around. I like to start on this corner, this opposite corner, and sew all the way around. I don't want to be starting or stopping on the pretty corner of the bookmark, and it's a little more awkward to start over here. I'm also going to pull up my bobbin thread. So I put my presser foot down, put my needle down, needle up. By pulling up the bobbin thread, you're going to make sure you don't have a weird knot from your machine mistakenly and rudely pulling your thread underneath. So you're going to grab both. You're going to hold them back while you get started. So just take a few stitches forward and then back to secure the thread, and then you're just going to keep going. Now, as I sew, each time I turn, I'm going to put this back behind here just to keep things a bit evened up. Now with another one, I did try just sewing this part and leaving this top corner unsewn. It gives a little bit of a different look, but I didn't like it as much because it made this whole thing like a little bit puffier in the book. So I'm a fan of doing the entire circle, but take a look and let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments if you like it better when you just sew the bottom closed and up this side and leave the corner that goes over the pages unsewn, or if you like it just sewn all the way around. Then you're just going to trim the thread and it's ready for a book. All right, so what do you think? Are you going to take a stab at some corner bookmarks? Let me know in the comments which size you like. And I am going to get back to The Secret Lives of Color. It is a lot more interesting than you might think. So I'm going to drop a link to this book. If you like to learn about color and some fascinating little stories, you might love this book, or it might be one that you want to gift to someone in your life. Happy sewing and happy reading. This is a mug. This is a coaster. A coaster is the perfect size for a mug. This is a mug rug, basically the same size as the coaster, but wider, shaped like a rug, hence the name. Mug rugs can come in any size you want. There are no mug rug police. This one is 4.5 by 7 inches. This one is 9 by 6. And this one is even bigger than that, about 9 by 10 or 11 because of the design that I wanted on there. The fastest way to make a mug rug would be to take 2 pieces of fabric, put some fleece or flannel on the inside, sew it together, turn it right side out, and you're done. Look at that. The beauty of a mug rug is there is room for stuff. You could put a cookie there, you could put a little plate with your tea bag, whatever you want. Or you can just put the mug in the middle. It's just a different concept, but basically the same as a coaster. I am going to show you how to make this folded mug rug in the same way that I have shown you how to make these coasters. It just is a little bit more interesting to have 4 different fabrics instead of just having something solid. So what do we need to make this mug rug? We need 5 pieces of fabric. So 7.5 by 5 for all of these pieces. Backing fabric, fleece or batting. Then you need 4 pieces the same size for the top. So I'm going to be using the sunflower, these sunflower tosses, and the honeycombs. These are from my Honey Bees and Sunflowers Please fabric collection from Riley Blake Designs. Most of the work is done at the ironing board, so let's head over there. We have our 5 pieces. If you're using fusible fleece, you're just going to fuse that to the back of your back fabric, which is this one, following the manufacturer's instructions, or you can use batting scraps. It's just something to give it a little bit of padding for your mug rug. Now we are going to take these 4 pieces, and because I'm using 2 directional pieces, it is a teeny tiny bit more complicated than if you had all non-directional prints, but I want to show you how to do this, and then anything else will be even easier. So you'll notice on this one, I made sure the stems were going in the same direction and one wasn't upside down. Well, I guess it really wouldn't matter. It would just look good from both sides. But I'm assuming most people are going to look at this from one direction. Different from the coasters, because the coasters are square, you just folded everything in half and pressed it, easy peasy. For the mug rug, because it is a rectangle, we're going to press 2 of the pieces in half by matching the short ends. Do that. I'm just going to give it a little press with my quilter's clapper just to cool that fabric off and press that seam. Okay, so we have those 2. And then these 2 are going to be folded by matching the longer ends. We're making longer, skinnier pieces. Now, if you have a clapper and you're doing a lot of pressing and using the clapper a lot at once, you can turn it over every once in a while, just so the heat goes into the opposite side and not always in one side of the wood. So now we have everything folded in half and pressed. Now, one very important thing to note is that the folded edges all need to be on the inside, and the raw edges all need to be what is going to be in the seam allowance when we sew this together. So you want to move them like that now. This one had the raw edges in, so I have all of the folds facing in. Because these are directional and I want to be a little controlling about what is showing, I'm going to be putting this together, and then we will put the backing on top. So this is going to be the top left. This is going to be the bottom left. So I am just matching the raw edges here and the raw edges here. Next, we're going to put the sunflowers up here. So we're going to match these folds and all these raw edges. The 4th one is the one that's slightly trickier because you have to lift one to weave it, because if we do that, we're not going to see this one at all. So what you do is you fold this one back. You put this one in, making sure again that the fold is going to be in the center. And then you simply fold that back. And just do another double check and make sure all the raw edges are lined up and nothing's, kind of off like that. So that looks good. Doing it this way, putting it together before we put the backing, we know exactly what is going to show when we're done. So now we're going to take our backing and we're going to put it right sides together. So the right side of the backing onto the right side of our folded mug rug fabrics and line up all of those edges. Okay, we're going to flip it. So this is what's going to be on the inside, which would also be pretty on the outside, but sometimes you don't know if you're going to get a good piece or not. Clip or pin, and I make sure that I clip where these folds meet just to keep everything straight and lined up. Now, one thing I love about this project is we're going to sew all the way around. We don't have to leave any space open for turning at all because we are going to be turning through all these folds. Okay, I think that's an adequate amount of clips. We've clipped all of the folded areas. We have it all nice and straight. I usually flip it over again, make sure I have everything caught on the back and I didn't miss any layers. Now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to sew all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You want to make sure that the foot doesn't go up under this fold. So I usually use scissors or a pen or something to hold that down to keep my fingers away from that needle. And as I said, we didn't need to leave anything open for turning. We could just go all the way around and start and stop at the same point. Now we need to clip the corners so that we can get them to turn as well as possible, because there are a lot of layers, 2, 4, 5, plus the fusible fleece. And that is a lot of layers in each of those corners. Now you can just clip the corner at a 45-degree angle to there. That is a very traditional way that people do that. But you're then going to have to fold all of that fabric into that little corner. So you're not going to get as good of a corner as if you taper the corner. I remember the term most people use for that. So I'm starting up here and cutting more of an angle. So you'll see more is cut off here than on this side. The main thing is make sure you do not cut your stitching. You also have to go a lot slower and more gently when you're turning this right side out, because there's very little beyond that stitching, and it will be easier for you to poke whatever you're using to turn out of that stitching or through the fabric. I'm going to trim all 4 corners. Now it is time to turn it right side out. So we have the fleece or batting or whatever you're using for the inside is on the outside right now. This is the inside of the fabric. You're literally just going to put your fingers in the center and you're going to flip each of these corners right side out. But they're still pretty rounded compared to these. So let's do a better job. I'm going to grab my turning tool. This is got a point, but it's not sharp. You could also use the tip of a pen if it's not opened. You could use a chopstick. Anything that's a little bit pointy that's going to get into that corner better than your finger. Now, the main thing to remember is you have to have your turning tool going against your filling. So if I were to try and push this corner out and put my turning tool here, between the sunflowers and this fabric, it's not going to turn the whole corner. It's just focusing on these two. I need it in here next to the fleece so that it is actually reaching the 2 top layers and the bottom layer. And then I'm just going to very slowly and gently, and sometimes I'll squeeze it like that. That helps move along that seam and push that out. You can see it's turned better than these other corners. So I'm just going to repeat that on the 3 other corners. Now, when you're happy with that and feel like you've done the best job that you can without pushing through the fabric or the stitching, you're going to lay it flat, just kind of move it, get those seams right on the edge, and then you're going to press. So you can be done. Like this one, I just pressed it and it's done. It's a little bit puffier. So for this one, I'm going to show you what stitching around the edge and even doing diagonal line stitching does to the look of the mug rug. So let's head back to the sewing machine. Now for doing top stitching on a project like this, the thread choice is going to impact how your project looks. If you want all of the thread to kind of disappear and not be a visible element of the design, you would use navy blue and then switch to gold. I don't want to have to switch my thread, so I'm just going to do navy all the way around. Now I'm going to go all the way to the corner because I am going to, for whatever reason, sew a diagonal down my coaster so that it should go right through that center. You can draw the line if you want to. I'm going to wing it and see how I do eyeballing it. Fingers crossed. Phew, I did a good job. I hit the center. Now I'm going to do it in the other direction as well. Now I could, again, change the thread color to gold if I didn't want this stitching to show, but I am just going to leave it with the navy blue. So that's it. Now we have 2 mug rugs. They are exactly the same fabrics, exactly the same size, but they look a little bit different because this one has just been sewn together and left a little bit puffier. And this one I stitched around the edge and then also through the center. If you feel like you're going to be putting these through the wash, I would probably recommend at least stitching the outside, if not doing a little decorative stitching on the inside. If you feel like you don't really dirty your coasters very often and you like this look better, you're totally fine. Mug on the mug rug. It looks good on them both. Today's video is going to the dogs. Dog bandanas in particular that fit right over their collar. We are going to make these out of simple squares of fabric. This is one of my most viewed videos on YouTube, but I've gotten a little feedback that it moves a little too quickly. So today I'm going to talk you through it, and I'm going to show you and explain the different size squares that you need for small, medium, or large dog collars. I took the small collar out of the one that I had already made and showed you just so you can have a visual of the three sizes. And we're mostly looking at the widths, not the color, nothing else. So let's talk about the squares that we need for each of these. We will start with the small, which is this one. You're going to start with an 8-inch square. So that's pretty easy to find out of scrap fabric. Then you're going to turn it on its side so it's a diamond. And I like to line it up on my grid just to make sure that I have everything straight. So these 2 points will become this bottom point of the bandana, and these two are going to be folded, cut, and sewn to make the channel for the collar. So for the 8-inch square, we are going to fold the sides in 1 3/4 inches. So what I like to do is take my handy dandy heat erasable pen and take a ruler. And the reason I get my square lined up on this grid is so that if I line my ruler up on the grid, I know I will be drawing straight on the corners of this fabric. So I have it lined up to 1 3/4. I'm going to draw a line. And I know that's dark, but it doesn't matter because once we hit it with an iron, it will disappear. We're going to do this on both sides. So we have the first one marked. We're going to be folding that under. Now let's take the second one. The medium size, you need a 10 by 10 fabric, which is perfect because if you like buying these stackers, I mean, look at how many bandanas we could make out of this stacker of all 10. So I'm going to do this one, these little flowers, but I do want to show you one thing to consider if you are using stackers. This is directional this way, but when we turn it this way and fold it and it becomes the bandana, it just doesn't look good because everything's sideways. It's not going this way. So don't use a directional fabric if it's already pre-cut into a stacker. Now, if you want to use the directional fabric, you can always cut it, but just make sure you cut it so that the direction is going this way. Hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, that's going to save me some time. Don't have to cut the 10-inch. I just have to line it up on my grid. And then for this one, we are going to fold the sides in 2 inches. So I'm just going to put my ruler 2 inches in, draw my line. And this one has to go in a little bit more because this collar is wider than this one. So we're going to be needing a wider channel. So we have the small one marked, the medium one marked. And now we need the large one. So the large dog bandana needs a 12 by 12 square. That's for this one. And again, we're just going to do the same thing. I'm going to line it up on my mat. And this one we're going to fold in 2.5 inches. The side we're going to mark, line it up on a grid so that it's easier to just double check 1, 2.5, because you're using your ruler and I'm also using the grid to make sure I'm drawing these lines in the correct place. Okay, large, medium, small. Let's grab the iron. So we're going to iron and fold on all of these lines that we just drew, and the lines are going to disappear when the heat hits them. So you want to make sure that you fold that over and kind of finger press it right on that line. Because once we hit it with heat, the line will be no more and you will not know where it was. Of course, you can always remeasure, being a little more dramatic than I need to be. Just do that. And then if you have a quilter's clapper or tailor's clapper and you want to use it, you're just going to iron and then just press that down. It absorbs the heat. It absorbs any steam if you're using steam in your iron. And my favorite part is it makes the fabric not so hot, so you're not burning your fingers. So we're going to do this fold on all 3 of these bandanas. Triangles are folded in for all 3 sizes to make the channel on our dog bandana. So I'm going to move the ironing board for a minute and we are going to trim again. Now this is where sometimes people think I do it a little weird, but I'm going to give you the reason why. I like to make the marks from the points and press it in once first before trimming, because what we're going to do is we're going to fold this and fold this to this line so that we can sew just like this. So you'll see that's folded and folded, so we have no raw edges. You can be more exact if you already have that crease set. I'm going to line that crease up on a grid line so that it's easy to see where that 1/2 inch actually is. So fold on the crease line, open it up. You might notice I have quite a few sizes of rulers, and it isn't necessary. If you're a beginning sewer, you can get one ruler and you will be good to go. If you do that, let's see, if you're just starting out, I would get a ruler like this. This is 24.5 inches, something big that will be straight all the way across fabric if you buy it by the yard, because you can always work with that with anything, but I'm going to show you here. So just when you're doing smaller things, it's a little bit more, oh, my fabric moved. It's a little bit more cumbersome to move around when you're cutting smaller pieces. That's why I'll usually grab a smaller ruler, but this works just fine. You can always add more ruler sizes as you continue with your craft, or not, totally up to you. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fold that into the crease, and I'm going to finger press it, which basically means just press down with your fingers to kind of get it to stay. And then I'm going to fold it again to where we had ironed that fold. Adjust if necessary, then press that. So that is creating the channel, this part, for our dog bandana. So I'm going to do that on each side of each bandana. And if you want to put a pin or clip on there, you can. Usually don't bother with that. We're going to be sewing the part we just folded down so that it's not going to pop up as you put your collar through the channel. And since we're going to be sewing from the back side of the fabric, and you don't want a big old bird's nest knot here by mistake, I'm going to show you how to pull up the bobbin thread. It's one of my favorite tricks, so you might have seen this before. You're going to hold the top thread, and then you're going to put the foot down, put the needle down, lift the needle back up, and give it a little tug. That gets the bobbin thread up to the top, so you can be holding both. Then you're going to put them under the foot. Now let me try and do it this way. And then my machine does have an automatic knotter, so I'm just going to do a knot. And I'm holding these two strings tight while I do that so that they can't get sucked back down and create that bird's nest. Now, if your machine doesn't knot on its own, you're going to go forward 2 or 3 stitches and then backward 2 or 3 stitches. Now I'm just going to do this for the rest of those pieces that we folded on all 3. Now, because I'm doing a few, I can chain stitch them just like you would for quilt blocks if you're a quilter at all, which basically means I'm not going to lift it and then have to pull the bobbin thread up every time. I'm just going to feed my second dog bandana along, and then I'll just cut them apart at the end. That can be a real time and thread saver. So if you've never done this before, this is what it's going to look like. You basically have a very small amount of thread right here in between. I'm just going to snip that, leave this one on, and then I'm just going to turn this around and do the other side of all 3. Back to the ironing board. We have all of the channels stitched. So now what we need to do is we need to fold them right sides together, match the points, and match the ends of the channels. And we're just going to press this top edge real quickly on all 3. And the next thing is we're going to sew here to here. So I am just going to put a couple little clips just to make sure the fabric stays lined up. You can use pins as well, but to me this is the perfect kind of project to use clips because it doesn't have to be super, super precise, and the clips are going to hold it together just fine. So even though I'm doing 3 because I'm showing you the 3 different sizes, this does give you an idea of efficiencies that you can use if you're making more than one of any specific project. If you group what you're doing, like do all of this pressing, do all of this sewing, do all of this, for all the ones that you're doing, you're going to be saving time. You can also do that chain stitching like I showed you. Save some thread, save some time not pulling bobbin threads up 6 times. You just did it once. All right, back to the sewing machine. Now we're just going to be sewing down this side and up this side, basically from channel to channel with a 1/4 inch seam. And we're going to come down to this point and we're going to pivot. Now I just want to give you a little tip. If you're new to sewing or you're teaching kids to sew, this can be really helpful. You can take a ruler, because we're going to be turning down here, right? And so you can take a ruler and make a little mark, a 1/4 inch from that edge. And then you can do the same thing on this side. And then you or they won't have to pay as much attention to where you are based on the foot or the markings on your sewing machine. You can just go to that point, pivot, and move. And it's going to be a really big confidence booster for beginning sewists. Even though my machine does have the automatic knot, I'm going to go back and forth on both ends because we're going to have to turn this through this pretty small channel, especially on this small one. And it's going to put a little bit of strain on that seam. So I like to reinforce it by going back and forth. So you'll notice my needle is at that mark, or almost, let's see. Yeah, it's like a hair before it. Now it's a hair after. And these markings on my 1/4 inch foot are at the edge of the fabric. So that, if I don't mark it, that is how I know that it's time to lift my presser foot and pivot to do a 1/4 inch on the opposite side. And just like with the last one, we can chain piece these. So I just overlap it where I can, make sure this is going to be lined up with the edge of my 1/4 inch foot, and just move forward. We're in the home stretch. The next thing we need to do is we need to clip our corners. You can either clip it straight across like that, but keep it a little away from the stitching. You do not want to cut the stitching. Or, and I prefer this way, especially with a point like that, is you can come in and take a little bit more off on each side. Because then there's less fabric that has to go in here and it's going to turn to make a better point. And you can just do it from the beginning. You don't have to go straight across first. I just wanted to show you the 2 ways to go. Now you'll see I didn't get right on that line, but it's fine. For a project like this, no one's going to know that it should have been a little bit over. Now, if this was a quilt block, that would have been a problem, but it's not, so we are good to go. Next step, we're going to turn these right side out through the channel. So you need to get the 2 channels turned out, and then we also need to get this point. And I always do it with my finger first, but that's not a very good point, is it? So I'm going to use this turning tool, which is designed to help get these points out. It's not too pointy. You still want to be careful. You could also use a chopstick or something else that isn't going to mark your fabric. But no matter what you use, make sure you are gentle as you massage that point, because if you go too hard, you could end up with this popping through, and then there will be sadness. Now we are going to iron this, and I'm going to make sure that that seam is on the edge so that it's nice and even on both sides. Now we're going to do the other 2. And when I'm getting these seams straight, I just kind of roll it a little bit to massage it to where I want it to be. And for these bigger ones, I'll do one side at a time because it's harder to get both of these sides to stay. So all 3 of these are pressed. You could just put the collar through without sewing the channel line. So you could leave it like that versus this, so you wouldn't have a stitch line, but you can also make the stitch line match the fabric so it won't really show. But I feel like doing this extra step keeps the bandana in place a little bit better, so I always do it, but it's totally up to you. If you like this look without another stitch line on there, try it and see how you like it. You can always come back and add it later if you decide that you're like me and you're like, yeah, you know what, she was right. I want to put that in there. So what we're going to do is grab our pen again, and I'm just going to draw a line that is parallel to this top fold and just about at the end of our channel. The main thing to do is you want to make sure there's enough space for this hook to go through. So even if we moved it up a little bit, it would be getting a bit tight because this has a little thickness to it too. So that is why we made these channels these specific sizes. Okay, 3 more lines to sew. Back to the sewing machine. So let me know how you would use these. Are you going to make seasonal bandanas for your own dogs? A lot of groomers will make quick bandanas for when they groom a dog. They send them home all fancy in a new bandana. This is also a great thing to sew and sell. This is very basic, very fast way to make them. You can put applique on them. You could make them out of solid colors. And if you are a crafter, you could use your Cricut and add different funny sayings and things like that. I do sell a lot of those on my crafty Etsy shop. I will put a link below this video so that you can find that as well. And anyway, let me know in the comments who you're going to make these for, what size you think you'll do, and happy sewing. I'm back with another tutorial that I wish you could smell. My room smells delicious because I have been doing sample lavender sachets. I'm going to show you a few ways that you can sew these up, a few different sizes, and you will see how incredibly easy these are to do. This could be a great gift for someone that's hard to buy for, your mom. It could be a teacher gift. You could do these smaller ones and make them little baby shower or bridal shower favors, something a little bit different. Lots and lots of ways to use them. So as you're watching this, leave me a comment. Let me know what you're inspired to do with these. First, we're going to need scraps of fabric. These were made out of 4.5-inch squares. They're a bit bigger. They're very fragrant. Or you could do part rice and part lavender if you didn't want them to be quite as fragrant as this set of 3 is. But look how cute it looks all wrapped up in the twine. These are made out of 4x4, and I've stuffed them differently. You can see this one has quite a bit more lavender in it than this one. Totally up to you how you want this to work. Now this one I added a little string to, like if you wanted to put it over a hanger and put it in your closet just to keep things a little bit fresher, or you could hang it in your sewing room. When people go by it and it moves a little bit, it'll activate that lavender smell and just be really pretty. I had sewn it across the top, and now I wish I had sewn across the bottom. You want to do the little hangers, I just did 4 inches. So you only have to remember one number, 4x4 squares, 4 inches of rickrack or ribbon or whatever you want to use. Then you're going to want to get some coordinating ribbons and bobbin threads so that you're not going to have this big white line. The lavender, of course, and I will have a link to where I got this on Amazon. This is the same bag that we made the sleep masks with. It's very compact. So once you pour it out and it fluffs up a little bit, you get a lot more than you realize from this size bag. Now I have pre-cut some of these to 4x4, and one of the things that I wanted to point out was this bird fabric. And if you watch many of my videos, you'll know I'm a big fan of fussy cutting because I design a lot of fabric that has icons on it. Now look at how cute that's going to be because I centered it very purposefully, hence the name fussy cutting. I was fussy about where I cut so that this icon's going to be right in the middle. This one is not fussy cut. It's just I cut 4 inches off the end and that's what I got. So I guess that butterfly is centered, but everything else is just kind of cut off and it's just not going to be as cute. I'm going to show you really quickly how to fussy cut if you're using fabric that has icons that you just really want to be cute in the middle. Now for this, I'm also going to get my rotating cutting mat, and I love this one from Creative Grids. It's a little bit bigger than most. It's 14 inches, so if you are a quilter, this is a wonderful size because you can trim a 12x12 block on it because it's 12.5 inches by 12.5 inches before you put it into your quilt. And if you're working with a 12x12, which is a pretty standard size, it's got to hang off the edges so you can't really trim it on there. So when I was doing the 4.5 inch, I had a 4.5 inch block, and this one I love because that blue is exactly 1/4 inch. So that's what you'll lose when you sew. So everything that you see is what you will get. So that makes it fun to just move it around. And that's so much easier to see exactly what we will get if we were to do a 4.5 inch. So this is where I really like having this because now I'm not moving my fabric. I'm not moving my ruler. I'm just moving the mat, so everything is going to stay. I'm not going to have to line anything up again, and it's going to be the perfect size. Now, another thing that I would recommend for these, because the lavender is kind of dark, I wouldn't use a totally white fabric. So for example, I wouldn't use this. Basically white with very subtle little sunshines on there, but you can see my fingers through it. So you would definitely see the lavender, which I don't think would be as nice. So I like to stick with prints that have a little bit of color to them. So we're just gonna put these flowers on the back of that. Now these flowers are also directional. You'll notice the bottoms of all the stems are down here, the tops are up here. So you want to make sure you put these together so that the top is at the same side. The next step to keep this nice and easy to sew together, and it makes it a lot faster to do a bunch of them, is we're going to pre-press the fold under of this. We're not going to sew anything together, we're going to press first. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not in love with the stitching on the top, so we're going to press on the bottom. So we're going to turn it wrong side up. I'm going to grab my hot ruler. I'm going to eyeball that that's about 1/4 inch, and then if I fold it down and it hits that line, ooh, I got a pretty good eye. And then you can just take the iron and it goes right on this ruler. If you're not familiar with these, they're amazing because you can measure and press right on there. Then I'm taking my quilter's clapper, which is just a piece of unfinished hardwood. It helps that crease and it helps absorb the heat. And if you were to use steam, it would help absorb any moisture. Now you'll notice it's not super creased because it did have to go around the ruler. So whenever I do that, I come back and I press it one more time and hit it with the clapper one more time, just to get it a little bit flatter. So now we have the bottom folded under, and we'll do the same thing on this one. And we're gonna make sure we're folding the bottom. So however many you're going to do, you're just going to cut all your squares, and then you're going to do this step of ironing on all of them. I think these would be fine to do individually if you were doing them for a party favor, like a bridal shower or a baby shower. But if you're giving them as a gift, I think they're cute to do in a little set of 3, tie them with a little bow or the little twine like I had there. And one thing I would recommend is if you are doing this for a party where you're going to be having a lot, I would put them in little plastic bags. Kind of like you would package a cookie, right? Put them in there, you could tie a bow around it, put a little sticker, thank you for coming. Because if you have like 30 or 40 of these sitting out, that scent might be a little overwhelming for some people that are sensitive to that. Be aware of that. It's also that would also be a great way to sew and sell them. Have them packaged so that they stay clean. Maybe have one out so that people can smell the lavender and make sure that they like the scent of the lavender that you have. Now, if you want to do them with the little string, or ribbon or whatever you want to use, you're just going to fold it in half and you're going to loop it so it goes in. Match these folded edges. And if you want to, you could baste it on there, but when I'm doing this, I just put it there and I clip that. All right, so we have those pressed and ready to sew. So let's head to the sewing machine. Now I have a few sets that I'm going to sew together and I'm going to chain stitch them, but I'm going to start using a leader fabric, which is just a scrap piece of fabric that I can start on so I don't have to knot. I just start stitching there, and if anything gets pulled down and get any bird's nest, it's going to be on this piece of junk and not on your project. Then you're going to take your fabrics and put them right sides together, matching the folded edges. And because these are so small, I don't pin or clip them. If you're new, you might want to, or if it just makes you more comfortable, that's fine. The most important is to make sure these folded edges are lined up. If somehow these are slightly off, it does not matter because I don't think anybody's going to be measuring to make sure every single one of these is the same size. I also use white thread when I'm just sewing all of these together, and then I change to the colors when I'm sewing them closed after we've added the lavender. So I'm going to move forward, but when I get onto my project, I'm just going to go back and forth a few stitches to knot that, and then just keep sewing around with a 1/4 inch seam. You can cut that leader fabric off. Now sometimes this bottom part will flip and open when it hits the edge of my needle plate. So I'm always watching to make sure that that stays folded. Then I also use my scissors to hold this down as we get there. I don't want my finger too close to that, and I want to make sure that goes under the presser foot. And now we're going to daisy chain this because we're not going to stop. We're just going to move on to the next one. So now I'm going to take these orange, I'm going to line up the folds and do the same thing. And then I often just cut them off as they start swinging around, since they're not going to just keep going forward like if you're daisy chaining for quilt blocks. The next steps are to clip the corners, flip them right side out, fill them with lavender, and put clips on them so that the lavender doesn't fall out as we head to the sewing machine, or even worse, into the sewing machine. So I'm just going to clip these corners, and I like to do longer angles. Gives a little bit better of a point, but this isn't a project that really requires a strong point. It looks really cute when it's just kind of curved and it's filled in anyway. So I don't even press these. I just clip those two corners, turn them right side out, and then just push that corner out with my finger. Then we're going to fill them. This is already pre-pressed under, and we will sew those together. So another idea I had was I think these could be great for like a coworker gift, or, you know, a girlfriend's girls' night gift, or favorite things gift. Maybe part of a favorite things gift. If you love lavender, you could make a set of sachets and a sleep mask for someone, for example. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you're thinking. Okay, I'm going to put this piece of fabric underneath. Lavender falls, we can then just funnel it from there and it won't get onto my mat. I do think this smaller size that starts with the 4x4, so it ends up about 3.5 by 3.5, is a good size if I was going to be making a lot of them. So if I was going to be making a set of 3 for like 5 of my girlfriends, I would do this because it's going to be still a great gift and it's going to take a lot less lavender. It's amazing how much less you would put in something this size than this size when the original square is only a 1/2 inch difference. It doesn't sound that much, but it's a pretty significant difference. All right, so fingers crossed. And then you can decide how much you want to fill them. Think about 1/2 to 3/4 full is a good amount. It just really depends how fragrant you want it to be. And then if they do start to lose their fragrance a little bit, you just shake them and it will reactivate the lavender. Then I'm just going to pinch these closed and add some clips. I usually do one on the end, one in the middle, and then I'll start sewing here. So I'm not going to put one there. I'll get these all filled and then we will go sew them all closed, which is going to require a few thread changes. Now, because we did press these and then sew them, you do need to be careful when you're sewing them closed to make sure that that seam doesn't stick out. Just kind of make sure it's tucked in there. But it's much, much faster to do that pressing before you even sew this together. Okay, so we have all 5 filled and clipped. Let's head back to the sewing machine. So now there's going to be thread changes so that I get everything coordinated. First, I have yellow on top and a yellow bobbin thread. For this one, that is yellow on both sides. And because we don't want a knot, I'm going to be pulling up the bobbin thread. So I put that down, hold this thread, foot down, foot up. Give that a little tug, grab that thread, and push it back. Then I can just go forward and back a few stitches. And this is just going to make sure that neither of these threads are going to get pulled down and create a big old bird's nest knot. Now you also want to make sure you have your lavender away from the edge. You want this just to be fabric on fabric. You don't want any lavender in your sewing machine or in your stitches. So now I'm going to change my top thread to blue to match this and keep the yellow on the bottom, or the bobbin rather. We have 3 more with blue on the top and they all have green on the bottom. So I'm just going to change the bobbin thread. I like doing the daisy chaining. It saves a lot of time, and as long as you clip those threads really close to the edge, I don't think anyone is going to know that you did it. All right, that's a wrap. So first let's look at these with little hang strings. Which way do you like it better? With it sewn across the top or sewn across the bottom? I definitely like that because if you're going to hang it up, it's going to be less noticeable with the stitch line down there. But either works if you forget and do it that way as well. Then these remind me a little bit of the bean bags, except they would be very light. Children would be very disappointed in them. And then we did the 2 different sizes. So you could do little piles. We could do a set of 2, a set of 3. You could do all birds. I don't know, I think it's kind of fun to do the mixed colors, makes for a fun selection. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any more easy sewing projects, fabric scrap projects, quilting for beginners, or ideas to sew and sell. If you're a fan of 2.5-inch pre-cut strips that you buy in little packs like this, I'm going to show you how to turn your extra scraps into nail file holders. And I'm going to show you how you can make them for any size nail file. Have you ever stuck your hand in your purse and inadvertently messed up your nail or scratched the top of your polish with one of the nail files in there? Ugh, it is the worst. This is where cute little fabric nail file holders come into play. Now, most nail files come in these two sizes. You can get those real little skinny ones too, the 7 inches and then the 3.5-inch long. And you can buy these in bulk. You'll be shocked at how inexpensive they are on Amazon. You can get like 100 to 200 of these for $5 to $10. And these for 100, you can get between, I think, $5 and $12. It just depends. If you want to just go with a basic color, it's going to be less expensive than something fun. This is an incredibly budget-friendly project. Let's start with this one. I am going to cut it to 14.5 inches long. Now, the way you figure out the length that you need is you measure the length of your nail file, you multiply it by 4, and you add 1/2 inch. Now we're just going to fold it, matching the short ends. We're going to take it to the sewing machine and just sew straight down both sides. Now we're going to sew each side with a 1/4 inch seam. Now if you're going to be making more than one at a time, just daisy chain, go down one side of all of them and then the other side, and you can just clip them off and keep going in one long strip. From one 40-inch strip of 2.5-inch wide fabric, you can make one long and one short nail file holder. Now I'm just going to clip these corners a teeny bit on the folded end so that it's going to make a better point when we turn that right side out. And I like to do really long angled to get a lot of that fabric out of there. If you have tube turners, this is the perfect project for it. I use the 1/2 inch. If you don't, you're just going to use your fingers, turn these right side out. But let me show you how this tube turner works. You put the hollow part into your project. It's even more important on longer ones. And then you take your stick with the pointier end going in first, and you push the fabric into the tube and pull it. See how fast that is? Now, when you use the pointy part, you can then use that as your turner and push those corners out. You want to do that really slowly and gently so that you don't all of a sudden see that point come through your fabric and get really bummed. So that's set. If I didn't have the tube turner, I could turn this right side out. Like you turn anything right side out, push that in, pull it out as best you can. It's a little harder on your fingers. It takes a lot longer without this tool. And it's very inexpensive. They're usually under $10 for a set of 3. And I use them for so many different projects. I would highly recommend you go grab one. I will have a link to find it on Amazon, or you can find it in most sewing stores, Michael's, places like that. So imagine how much of a pain that would be to do by hand. But with the tube turner, it is lickety split. And this is the size for one of the longer nail files. So I pulled it down. You don't want to pull this off until you have the fabric through, because you want to hold that fabric, pull that down, pull that off. But see how fast that was? These are amazing if you're making aprons and have those really long straps. You can turn them right side out in a jiffy. So now let's take all 3 of these. We're just going to make 3 at once today. We're going to take all 3 of these to the ironing board. So what we need to do is we need to get these seams pulled out evenly. We don't want it to be folded over. Like we don't want any of the fabric tucked in as we press. So I usually just take my fingers and I move them back and forth and get one side good and iron that side, and then press down with the tailor's clapper. And then I come and do the other side. I find trying to do both at the same time, I often end up with one side not quite right, where it's, not pulled out as much, and then it's not going to be straight. And then I'm using this to help cool off the fabric and really set that so it is nice and flat. So I'm going to get all 3 of these to that same stage, and then we are going to press those raw edges in, and we are going to sew across the top to basically make a closed fabric tube. Turn that under about a 1/4 inch. If you go a little bit further, it's totally fine. This is not a quilt block, so it's not something that needs to be super precise. Just make sure it is folded and even. And then press that. I've seen other tutorials where people use interfacing or even a stiff interfacing to make the nail holders harder, but I really don't think it's necessary because the nail file is going to do that for you. And I am all about quick and easy projects with as few materials as possible. So let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be and just use a piece of fabric. And as you can see, if you just do each step multiple times, you can really whip out a bunch of these at once. So that does make it a great gift, a great project or idea to sew and sell because you can use your fabric scraps. It's not going to take you a lot of time. The nail files aren't expensive, and it is a great impulse purchase if you sell at craft fairs or online. These are all pressed and ready, so we're going to go back to the machine and we're going to sew straight across the open edges of all three. If you want your thread to coordinate so it's not very visible, you could pick something that matches. But because I'm doing a few, I'm just going to use white thread so that I can get all three of these done quickly. And I did one where it matched the green, so I'll be able to show you the difference that the thread can make. I'm going to use a little leader fabric, which is just a little scrap piece of fabric that I'm going to put behind what I am sewing, because then I can start back here. I don't have to worry about pulling up the bobbin thread, and I can just sew right onto here, back stitch, and get that sewed closed. So you're not going to have any kind of a bird's nest on the project, and you don't have to take that time to pull up the bobbin thread. I like to do that when I'm starting off of the edge of a project. Just makes it easier and faster. So we have all three of those. Now we're just going to take that leader fabric off the back so that we can use it again. Snip these apart, cutting off the excess thread in between if there is any. And we're going to go back to the workspace. I'm going to show you how to decide how much to fold these up before we finish the sewing. Isn't this easy? Who are you going to make them for first? I would love to know. Now we are going to fold these up and sew them together. So this one, the nail file is almost all the way in. You can also make them longer and have them flap over, but this is the quickest and easiest way. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your strips of fabric and you're going to put the folded side up. Then you're going to place your nail file on there, and you're going to fold it up. If you want it to be exactly like that, you can just sew here and here as two separate stitch lines. But because I like things to move a little bit faster, I like to sew down, across, and up and be done. Which means this is going to stick out a little bit more because you're going to lose here. So see, that's where the edge of that nail file is. So now it's coming across the top. So I'm gonna just move this down a little bit more, fold that up, because I want my file to not go above the backing. So that is how long I want that one. I'm just going to put a little clip in there and do the same thing on this one. And oh my gosh, isn't this tape measure perfect with the little quilt block fabric? Love it. So I'm pushing to make sure there's about a ½ inch up there, because then when I push that up a little to accommodate for the stitching that's going to go across there, we know how much it's going to come out. And if you don't want as much sticking out, just use a longer strip of fabric. Back to the sewing machine, we are almost done. Now on the last step, I taught you a trick to not have to pull the bobbin thread up, but here you're going to need to, because we're starting in the center of fabric. There's fabric in front and behind where you're starting, and you're going to see the back. What you do is you hold the top thread, put your foot down, put your needle down, lift your needle, give a little tug, and then I always keep tweezers so that I can grab that without poking my finger. It also helps me push those threads down, get it under the foot. Now I'm going to hold both of these threads as I take my first few stitches forward and back to knot. And that will prevent the machine from pulling that thread under and creating what we love to call bird's nests. They are so quick and easy to sew. Throw them in your purse. These make great gifts. Teacher appreciation, they could be shower favors, you could put them into a little self-care box, a manicure gift, so many things that you can do with these. So that one is done. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the other two. All that's left is to add the nail files. How cute is that? Let me know in the comments If you're going to give this as a solo gift, if you're going to make a little manicure, pedicure gift pack with it, what you plan to do. I'm always curious about what people do with my projects. Make sure you have subscribed to my channel, hit that bell so YouTube lets you know every time I post something. So what do you think? Which ones are you going to try? Which ones are you going to try first? I would love to know. Let me know in the comments what you're thinking, or if there's another thing you had in mind that you can't find on my channel yet, and I will add it to my list.